It turned out that we'd been living in a fool's paradise in our peaceful little island, believing that our cocooned existence in Jersey would continue as usual, and that the war raging on the other side of the Channel didn't concern us. As if to reinforce our complacency, thousands of sun-hungry tourists from Britain continued to flock to our sandy beaches as they had always done. Looking back, I think the world as we knew it had begun to crumble 4 years earlier, with the abdication of King Edward VIII. At the time, we saw it as a regrettable but isolated event. But, in light of later developments, I think it indicated a general lowering of moral standards and foreshadowed a succession of unsettling events that threatened our comfortable lives. Margaret applauded Edward's decision as a triumph of love over royal privilege, but I saw it as a dereliction of duty, and I suspected that it had as much to do with his distaste for royal responsibilities as with his inability to live without Mrs. Simpson. And I felt sorry for his stuttering brother, who was now thrust onto a throne he didn't want. For some reason, my attitude seemed to irritate Margaret, who became quite vehement in her criticism. "You don't have a single romantic bone in your body," she said. "How can you put duty ahead of love?" I replied that if everyone followed Edward's example and decided to abandon their duty, society would disintegrate, and I suggested that perhaps her condition had made her over-emotional. This sparked a row, and we argued heatedly, not suspecting that the conflict between love and duty would soon be acted out in our own lives. About 18 months after the abdication, our country suffered another moral lapse, when Prime Minister Chamberlain travelled to Munich to appease a tyrant who seemed to believe he was entitled to trample over other countries with impunity. Mr. Chamberlain came back, waving that piece of paper and talking about nice Mr. Hitler. "Chamberlain's an idiot," my father had fumed. Father was a retired army major who had fought in the Boer War and later in the one they called the Great War, and he didn't mince words. "You can't negotiate with bullies, and you certainly don't reward them. You whack them hard to teach them a lesson." As usual, he was right. Father, who never suffered from doubt, died in the spring last year, and I missed his dogmatic certitude. Encouraged by naive politicians who averted their gaze, Hitler continued invading neighbouring countries until, on the 3rd of September, our leaders finally opened their eyes and declared war. So we entered 1940 at war with Germany. After that shock announcement, some patriotic Jerseymen enlisted in the British Army. But then nothing happened, or so it appeared to us in Jersey. Although the British government had entered the war to support Poland's sovereignty, no British soldiers or fighter planes were sent to defend it from German tanks. War was being fought far away. We read about it, but it didn't affect us. In the meantime, merchant ships kept docking in our harbour, loading up tons of Jersey tomatoes and potatoes. The tourists kept coming to sunbake on our beaches, and life continued, as usual. But as the year progressed, it all changed. In May, the war exploded into our consciousness, first with the defeat of Belgium, Luxembourg, and Holland, and then with the shocking defeat of France. We were appalled to see photographs of the swastika hanging from the Eiffel Tower. Now the Germans were practically on our doorstep, and we held our breath as we read about the plight of hundreds of thousands of British soldiers stranded on the beaches of Normandy. When they were rescued in the great evacuation of Dunkirk, we toasted the boats, the sailors, Mr. Churchill, and our British refusal to surrender. Unlike the French, whose capital had just been invaded without a single shot being fired, we vowed we would fight the Germans and we would never surrender. All this time, we still felt protected by Britain. It was blitzkrieg in Europe, but we knew that Britain would never abandon us. Our connection went back almost 1,000 years to William the Conqueror. The Channel Islands were the oldest part of the British Empire. That had to count for something. Inside the Cock and Bottle, where I sometimes dropped in for a pint of our local Mary Ann ale, tempers flared as people argued about our future. Some predicted that as we were only a tiny speck in the English Channel, closer to France than to England, we were of no value to anyone and would be left alone. Just as well.